coast, we gon' bring that fire. In the heart of college football, we the ones they admire. Yo, it's game day, stadium packed, feel that rush. From Boise to App State, man, we never hush. Rocking the colors, yeah, we bleed that pride. Cinderella stories, watch our dreams collide. Late nights, bright lights, we grind every play. Underrated talent, we gon' make them say, who's that team when we come to town? Representing for the schools that wear the crown. We in the G5, high buzzing loud, we thrive. Underdogs rising up, taking shots, we alive. From the mountains to the coast, we gon' bring that fire. In the heart of college football, we the ones they admire. Yo, it's game day, stadium packed, feel that rush. From Boise to App State, man, we never hush. Rocking the colors, yeah, we bleed that pride. Cinderella stories, watch our dreams collide. Late nights, bright lights, we grind every play. Underrated talent, we gon' make them say, who's that team when we come to town? Representing for the schools that wear the crown. We in the G5, high buzzing loud, we thrive. Underdogs rising up, taking shots, we alive. From the mountains to the coast, we gon' bring that fire. In the heart of college football, we the ones they admire. We the ones they are. The ones they can't skip. Fighting for respect, it's a tough road ahead. But we pack that heart and we never dread. Late hits and big plays, we bring in the heat. Watch out for the G5, we can't be beat. From the MAC to the Sun Belt, we don't back down. In this football jungle, we wear the crown. All the doubt is sleeping, but we making noise. In the G5 Hive, we the realest boys. When the clock's ticking down, we the ones to believe. One play, one chance, we gon' make them achieve. From the sidelines to the end zone, hear that roar. In the G5 Hive, we always wanting more. We in the G5 Hive, buzzing loud, we thrive. Underdogs rising up, taking shots, we alive. From the mountains to the coast, we gon' bring that fire. In the heart of college football, we the ones they admire. So raise your flags high, let them wave in the air. In the G5 Hive, we the squad that's rare. With heart and grit, we rewriting the script. In the world of college football, we the ones they can't skip. Yeah. We in the G5 high, buzzing loud, we thrive. Underdogs rising up, taking shots, we alive. From the mountains to the coast, we gon' bring that fire. In the heart of college football, we the ones they admire. Yo, it's game day, stadium packed, feel that rush. From Boise to App State, man, we never hush. Rocking the colors, yeah, we bleed that pride. Cinderella stories, watch our dreams collide. Late nights, bright lights, we grind every play. Underrated talent, we gon' make them say, who's that team when we come to town?
Here's Navarro on the run. Navarro's going to keep it. Navarro for 6! Touchdown, Bobcat!
I feel I had a hard time staying in my own lane.
Oh my goodness! Red Murdoch! Pick 6! Harvath inside the 30, the 20. Blake Harvath will score! And Mendoza takes a big hit. He never saw it coming. Trey White got in there. There's his man, Rucker. And nobody's going to catch him. Goodbye. Intercepted. Tyree Skipper. Touchdown.
Telly again, why not? A step forward and make it 2 for Telly.
Quarterback keeper showing off the speed. Steps on the gas. Untouched.
The G5 Hive. All G5 all the time.
Welcome to the G5 Hive Live. We are excited to bring you the G5 college football coverage you love each and every week. I am Luke, and I'm joined by my co-host, Justice. If you're watching us on YouTube, please hit that like and subscribe button. And if you are watching us on X, please give us a follow, a like, and a retweet. And if you're listening to us in podcast form, please rate and review. The G5 Hive merchandise store is now live. Link in the YouTube video comments, as well as pinned to our X page and here on the bottom of the screen. Justice, we're back. We're here to talk more transfer portals, more coaching changes, Conference USA. It's like we've never left.
My wife would disagree with you. We hadn't done Monday in a while, right? We had, I guess, 2 episodes were recorded because we had guests. We kind of had to meet their timelines when they could do it. Last week we had a guest as well, so we had to shift from Monday to Saturday, and we were live. But so yeah, my wife came up to me a couple hours ago, and she's like, "I thought you had a podcast." I said, "I do." At 10:30, and she just kind of rolled her eyes and walked away.
So I guess you know how at work they have like work wives. I guess I would be considered your work wife. You'd be my work wife. Right. Our wives could probably hang out and talk to each other about how much they love football.
Oh yeah, yes, absolutely. Like football podcasts, you name it. Yeah. She's not a fan of football anyway. So
neither is
sports in general. She don't like sports in general.
Well, let's get into what the Swarm needs to know. News and notes for this week.
So start off with some coaching news. Buffalo extended head coach Pete Limbo. He signed an extension to stay at Buffalo through 2029. He was a new head coach last year, so they've extended him for 5 years, I guess. I don't know how much the extension was from his original contract, but he's at least extended it around for another 4 or 5 seasons. North Texas is expected to lose co-defensive coordinator Brian Odom to Washington. Odom was the only returning member of the Mean Green's defensive staff. I don't know. This doesn't seem like a big deal to me. They brought in a lot of the coaches over from Sam Houston. And so I don't know. This kind of makes sense, right? He was kind of odd man out, or he wasn't really part of the clique, so to speak, to begin with. So I don't personally see this as a huge impact. Maybe some folks in North Texas would disagree with that comment. But I think the Sam Houston guys will do a good job. They had a good defense there at Sam Houston, and I expect them to have a good defense there at North Texas. The issue is going to be is the dynamic between offensive and defensive schemes. At Sam Houston, it was very much a ball control offense. They would take shots deep, but they weren't throwing it all over the place. North Texas is going to throw it all over the place, and so I think if you're expecting North Texas to have a number 1 defense in the American,
statistically, just not
never going to happen. Exactly.
Possessions that they're going to face, yeah,
it's just never going to happen. But I do think North Texas should have a stronger defense than they had last season. Jacksonville State hires Brian Williams as their DC. Williams replaces Vinny Sanseri, who left to become the co-DC and the safeties coach at Florida. He had been at Maryland since 2019. He was the co-DC defensive line coach there in 21, 22, 24. I don't want to take away too much of our thunder because we're going to talk about Jacksonville State as part of Conference USA. So yeah, they get a new DC there. NFL Combine invites came out this week, or the list of who all was invited. From the G5, you had a total of 21 G5 players, 10 offensive players, and 11 defensive players, and one player. What's that?
The exclusion.
Oh yeah, the one exclusion really kind of stands out to me, and that's linebacker Sean Dolak, Buffalo. You look at the linebackers invited, he most definitely belonged. Defensive line, if some defensive linemen that I felt weren't invited, I can understand that. I feel like the defensive line group is super, super deep in an NFL draft this year, and they increased the numbers. I want to say the number of defensive linemen they got invites to the combine went up 50% compared to last year. I want to say last year there was like 40-ish or so. This year, I think it's like in the 60s, the number of defensive linemen invited. So they definitely increased the defensive linemen. So if a defensive lineman got left off, like I wouldn't have heartburn about it. But Sean Dolak, like a unanimous All-American.
Not the first time he's been snubbed this year on something.
No, it's not. It's not. He should have been a finalist for the Butkus Award for the top linebacker in the nation. The fact that he wasn't even a finalist was kind of a farce. I get like a G5 guy is not likely to win, but he should have at least been a finalist. But yeah, I'm shocked. I'm shocked that he did not get invited to the combine. I feel like he's an NFL talent. He's going to make an NFL roster. I think he's going to play middle linebacker for an NFL team. I don't think he's like just strictly a special teams guy. So yeah, definitely surprised that Sean did not get that NFL combine invite. I still personally think he'll get drafted. Maybe it's late, but I feel like he will get drafted in the NFL draft. So and that happens, right? Last year we were surprised Trey Taylor didn't get an invite, right? Trey Taylor won the Jim Thorpe Award as the best defensive back in college football and did not get invited to the NFL scouting combine, and he got drafted. So it's not unheard of. Like if you don't get the scouting combine, that you don't get drafted. And I think that'll be the case for Sean Dolak. One thing I did find interesting, like last year Trey Taylor didn't get invited, but safety Rawan Lane III from Navy got invited this year. And I would have argued like Trey Taylor had a much better year a year ago than Lane did this past year. So I don't necessarily always agree with the rhyme and reason for guys that get invited to the combine, but certainly expect Sean to get drafted come April. I don't know how you'd characterize this NIL news. Probably, but Pathway is a company that is signing college football teams to represent those players in video games. So the college football video game. They're offering the players at least $1,500 a piece, which is more than double what EA Sports offered players a year ago. EA Sports offered players, I think, $700 and a copy of the game. So Pathway is trying to, I'm assuming now Pathway is going to be the one that has to negotiate with EA, and they're going to up that ante, right, in terms of what EA is going to have to pay, because they're going to have to get that money from somewhere to pay each of these players at minimum $1,500. There'll be some players that get more than $1,500 through Pathway, but at a minimum they'll get $1,500 each. I don't know necessarily what to make of this. Like I understand why both sides would do it, right? I mean, Pathway's doing it to make money, right? If they can get the majority of players to sign with them, then EA Sports has no choice other than to, if they want the players' names, they got to come to an agreement with Pathway. And from the player's perspective, it's double, but I don't know. Maybe EA Sports could circumvent this by offering more. And I don't know. It just seems like someone's trying to make money off these players, right? That's ultimately what's going to happen. And then they're trying to do it based on getting the quote numbers. And maybe EA could have avoided this by just offering the players more money, right? And then get rid of the middleman, so to speak. Because I got to assume like Pathway is going to be asking for more than $1,500 a player, right? Because they're going to want to make money. It's I don't know, interesting dynamic. And I think we could see more.
I think there was something in there too, if I remember reading it correctly, that there'd be a negotiation over, like, they would have their name, image, and likeness, so that then when they go to the NFL, if they go to the NFL, then there's some sort of logistics between what you have to what is typically considered the quote unquote normal rookie contract and what that entails, and you'd have to make sure that whatever you are signing your contract with Pathway doesn't prohibit or infringe on anything that could happen if you go to
Yeah.
NFL. There's, if I'm remembering all those
It was about video games and NFL too, and likenesses, and all that's done through the collective bargaining agreement. And so there was some concern that there is conflict. You're signing this agreement that gives away rights that you won't have the right to give away, because that's already part of the NFL player collective bargaining agreement. So yeah, I mean, I don't know. That part was kind of interesting. I read it. I was more concerned about the college football part. I think obviously I think it's good to get more money for the players themselves, but I don't know. It just seems like from Pathways perspective, it just seems a little slimy to me. Just because that's their MO is that they're just trying to produce volume, so that EA has to negotiate with them. So it'd be interesting to see where they get with that. Speaking of NIL revenue sharing, we just did 2 special episodes where we spent the entire episodes talking about NIL revenue sharing, what's coming down the pipe. And last week, as many expected, the Department of Education rescinded the revenue sharing Title IX guidance. So back in, I don't know, sometime in early January, the Department of Education issued some guidance. It wasn't like, quote, rule or law, but it was guidance that basically said when the schools start doing revenue sharing, which is the school's version of NIL, when the schools directly pay the players, that it had to be done in accordance with Title IX. And as expected, many folks said, well, with the new administration, that'll go away. And that's what happened. But I mean, in general, we talked about the possibility of that happening with our guests. I just think the answer to that problem is to not get rid of your collective, because it offers so much more flexibility when things like that do happen. Because in that particular scenario, if that Title IX guidance had stood and been enforced, then the schools were in for a rude awakening, I guess, in how they can spend that $20.5 million. And I think they would have gotten very creative in ways with the ways to do that. And it doesn't really, I mean, just because this guidance came out doesn't mean that there is no lawsuit next week that changes it, right? Speaking of lawsuits, not football, but now I've seen where 2 baseball players are suing the NCAA to basically get the same thing as the Diego Pavia ruling because of JUCO. And the fact that they have to do that, to me, is just idiotic, right? Like, you made this ruling for football. You should just say, hey, it applies to all sports, right? You shouldn't require a baseball player to sue you and a swimmer to sue you and a cross-country athlete to sue you, right? That just makes zero sense to me. But it's the NCAA, so
maybe the lawyers aren't getting paid enough and they need more of those hours.
Absolutely. There was some this has been a hot topic, I don't know, the last couple weeks or so, about spring games and will they be a thing of the past. We saw, I think it was Matt Rule at Nebraska said we ain't having a spring game. I think someone else came out and said we're not having a spring game. And people were making a big deal about it. And I don't know. I feel like most schools, or at least 50-50, don't have, quote, a spring game. It's not a game. It's more of a showcase, that they run some, different scenarios, etc. It's more of an event than it is a game.
Yeah,
I feel like that's
how many of them have been like ones versus ones? Like it'll be like ones versus threes, and it's like, okay, well, what are we doing here? I look at the whole spring as a chance for interactions with the fans, almost
yes,
like a Savannah Bananas type thing. Like if you want to go that far, I think there was examples of I think it was Old Miss maybe did something like that where they had
yeah,
a
they did. Yeah, like hot dog
hot
eating
dog.
contests.
Yeah. So like I think that kind of stuff, maybe that's on one end of the spectrum, but like I get it. Like having a 7-on-7 or something like that, where it's mainly just getting engagement from the fans, signing autographs, things like that.
Yeah, so w- last week there was some talk that college coaches are considering NFL style OTAs. And the gist of it is that they don't want their players getting a lot of publicity and getting poached is really what the crux of the issue is. And I don't really understand like where that comes from, because it's not like very few of these games are televised, right? Some of the P4 games are, but I think there was only supposed to be one or two G5s that were televised last year. One of them was Kennesaw State, and I forget the other one. And the Kennesaw State one got canceled. But yeah, I don't know that. I feel like they're going about the wrong way. To your point, Luke, I feel like they use, especially in this day and age of the portal, this is the time to bring fans in and try to get them excited about your program. Let them, like, to me, like it should be more of an event. Like let them come tailgate, make a big event about about it, and try to build excitement for your program, not the other way around where you're trying to hide and cover up everything you do. I think that's the wrong way to go. But coaches are going to be coaches.
Yeah, and it's not like, you know, the kids have, I mean, we've seen out there on Twitter, on X, whatever you want to say, kids who maybe aren't starting but they get practice reps. We see those out on Twitter or X. Like they can get these videos if they want to go to the portal. They can go to the portal. Like I don't think you're necessarily making it any easier or harder. Like, oh, I saw that rep against that first string against the third string. Like I think we're gonna get them. Like I
Right.
really don't think that is an issue. If they want to
Yeah,
say it's an issue, fine, whatever.
yeah, I agree. The Battle of the Valley, the rivalry between San Jose State and Fresno State, which would have kind of gone away with Fresno State moving to the Pac-12, is going to continue at least for 6 more years. The two schools announced a 6-game series starting in 2026, where the two will play each other, even with them being in separate conferences. And I don't know, that's good for. It's always good for football, right? Like to maintain your rivalries. Sucks it's kind of out of conference, but at least you maintain the rivalry. And I'll let you take over this last piece of news, Luke, because this was something that you saw.
So it's not G5 related, but I think it's interesting just based off of the collectives of our 2 episodes that we've had and things that we've talked just in general. So Nick Polk was hired as Florida GM. Why is that newsworthy? Well, he most recently was a Atlanta Falcons executive for the last 17 years. He served as a director of football administration, director of football operations, including salary cap management, draft negotiations, contract proposals, player and coach contracts, football budgets. It just seems like an interesting hire given the current landscape of college football. I think they are putting themselves, um, maybe reading the tea leaves as to where football is going. And I think this honestly puts Florida in a really good spot going forward. but I just think it was one of those things that I don't really feel like it's been talked about a whole bunch, but one of those things to just, I don't know, put in the back of your head or whatnot, just as we see things in the college landscape move and go here or there. Brett says, yeah, that's an interesting hire. Like, it, again, it doesn't do anything to the X's and O's, but maybe it helps get some players in. If we just see a rise in Florida, maybe, you know, what's going on behind the scenes. I think this is just a newsworthy topic to bring on, just based off of what we've talked about in the last couple episodes with the collective and stuff like that.
Yeah, and it seems to be a trend, right? I mean, Ron Rivera was recently hired by Cal, I believe, to serve as kind of like their GM. And so you're seeing these. I guess it really kind of started with Bill Belichick, right? I guess that would have to be the starting point of that, where he brought in a bunch of former NFL executives to kind of help him run things there at North Carolina. And then you're seeing this trend of other. You haven't seen it at the G5 level yet, but you see this trend of other P4s kind of getting some NFL executives. A handful of them getting NFL executives in. And you're right. Like, that's ultimately that's where it's headed, right? It's going to, in my opinion, there's going to be a collective bargaining agreement, all that, just like there is in the NFL, and it's going to be very similar, I think, with obviously the main exception, you only have them for a limited time. Maybe that changes too, right? The way eligibility goes nowadays. Maybe that'll change as well, but that's probably the biggest difference, where you have the limited time with these players. So yeah, definitely something interesting, and be interesting to see who the first, or if a G5 will kind of take that jump as well, and who that first G5 would be. If someone asked me, like, who do you think the first G5 that would do something like that was, I would say Memphis would be my first choice.
I would go with Boise State would be my first choice. Dirk Cutter, they've just, I don't know, he's in the NFL, just came over. I think there might be some ties there at Boise State and things that they've kind of just done in the past. That would be my pick. Well, let's get into it. Let's get into the nectar, the good stuff. Transfer portal, coaching changes, Conference USA. Let's start with a new name in the conference, and that is Delaware Blue Hens. They were 9-2 last year. Coaching changes. There are no new coaching changes. So let's get to know these guys a little bit. Head coach Ryan Carty, 4th season prior to Delaware. He was the OC at Sam Houston. He was 26-11 in his time as a head coach. Back-to-back 9-win seasons. FCS playoff appearances in each of his first 2 seasons, but was ineligible in 2024 due to the transition to the FBS. He was hired at New Hampshire to be the tight ends coach by OC Chip Kelly. So just kind of some interesting things about him. OC Terrence Archer will be in his 2nd season. DC Manny Rojas will be in his 6th season. The Blue Hens are coming from the Coastal Athletic Association Football Conference, or the CAA, formerly known as the Colonial Athletic Association. They were called the Colonial Athletic Association from 2007 to 2022. So there's a little rundown of the Delaware Blue Hens, and as Billy Tuesday says in the chat, fighting Blue Hens. He's pumped.
Yes. I have a little bit of, I've seen the Blue Hens play because when Old Dominion started football, they were also members of the CAA. So we played Delaware a couple times. That's been, I don't know, 10, 12 years ago last time we probably played them. So it's been a long, pretty sure Casey Keeler was still the head coach at Delaware when we were playing him back then, before he went and made his move to Sam Houston.
I guess I should say all of that stuff. Ryan Carty I talked about his being an OC at Sam Houston. Well, like his 4 seasons, he's 26-11 in there, or I guess in his 3 seasons. And then everything that I talked about there with their eligibility and his back-to-back 9-1 seasons, that's with the Delaware Blue Hens. Make sure to clarify that.
Yeah, because he was, I believe he was the OC under Keeler at Delaware. He followed Casey Keeler to Sam Houston, and then he ended up going back back to Delaware, I think, after maybe 1 year. I don't, he wasn't I don't think he was at Sam Houston very long before he ended up going back. Player wise, who they lose, defensive back Tyler Davis is off to Temple. Defensive lineman Melkart Abu Jaudi off to North Carolina. Running back Marcus Yams, not Yarns. Marcus Yams off to the NFL. He actually got a combine invite, so that's pretty cool, right? To see a guy from the FCS get a combine invite. Wide receiver Phil Lutz out of eligibility. Wide receiver Jake Thaw out of eligibility. And as we tweeted out over the weekend, quarterback Ryan O'Connor is not returning. O'Connor had a potential year of eligibility left, a medical year, but he's decided not to use that to pursue other life opportunities. Not surprising, because I think O'Connor has a history of concussions, and so you certainly can't fault him for just deciding to move on with his life. Who they're bringing in: edge Noah Matthews from Kentucky, defensive back Khalil Ali from Boston College, and defensive back Thomas Amankwa from Rutgers. I think the offense is a fast-paced offense. In the past, it's been a spread offense that probably, I would say, tends to run the ball more than what you think maybe a typical spread offense does. But maybe that's because they had, a Marcus Yams who was going to the NFL, and they wanted to utilize their talent, right? The most talented guys get the balls in their hands. I think the quarterbacks that they have that are returning, they got look at their names. The one guy is much more of a runner than a passer. That's Nick Minakuchi. He played some games last year. They also return Zach Marker. I think the two of those guys are different styles. I think Marker is more of a passer, and Minakuchi is more of a runner. I think those are probably the two guys that are going to battle for the starting job. So I think the offense is really going to be dependent upon who that starter is and what their identity, I think, looks like in 2025. I don't think this is going to be a good transition for him in terms of year one. I don't expect Delaware to have a lot of success. Like I said, losing their best player and Marcus Yams off the NFL, and then probably their second best player, Ryan O'Connor, deciding to move on from football. So I don't foresee this being a super successful season. I think, if they can get a win or two in Conference USA, they would deem that a success. And they play Kennesaw State, and so that's got to be their
like
best
a litmus test.
That's probably their best shot at a win, I would say.
The thing that's interesting in regards to like other teams that have made the transition up is, they were 9-2 and they've had success for the last several years, which I don't think has always, been the case. Like jumping right in, like obviously they get the move up because they're typically good. So, but we've seen some of those teams back off of not having some guys play because they want to try to preserve a year and stuff.
Sam Houston did that big time, like when they
and I haven't dug in. Yeah, and I haven't dug into Delaware enough to
I
know
don't
if that's
think-
what happened, but like
I
with a
don't think
9-2
so.
record, I can't imagine that that's what happened.
No,
So
I
it'll
don't
be
think.
kind of interesting.
Yeah, I don't think Delaware took the Sam Houston route and redshirted a bunch of guys in preparation for the move up. So yeah, I think it's going to be a rough year one in Conference USA for the Fighting Blue Hens.
All right, well, let's move over to Florida International Panthers. They were 4-8 this last season. Coaching changes, none. All these coaches will be going into the fourth year with FIU. Head coach Mike McIntyre, OC David Yost, and DC Von DeWitt.
I'm pretty sure Willie Simmons is head coach now.
Is that what happened? Did I miss that?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure
Right.
Mike McIntyre got fired.
No, you're right. You're right.
Willie Simmons Willie Simmons.
Yep. Sorry about that.
No, it's all good. Willie Simmons is the new head coach coming over from, I think, Florida State. I could be wrong about that, but I think he comes over from Florida State. While you're getting, go ahead.
Willie Simmons coming over from Duke. He was the running backs coach in 2024.
He was at Florida A&M before that, right?
Florida A&M from 2018 to 2023. So my bad there.
Yeah. So all new coaching staff there for the Florida International Panthers. I mean, Willie Simmons has a lot of energy. I think he's known as a good recruiter. And we'll see if that pans out there for Florida International. Player personnel wise, they lose a whole lot on offense and defense, and this team wasn't necessarily good last year. So offensive, who's leaving? They lose running back Shamari Lawrence, who is going over to Missouri State, who's also a new member of Conference USA, and we'll get to here shortly. Safety CJ Christian is off to Washington. Cornerback Hezekiah Massis is off to California. Linebacker Travion Barnes is off to Baylor. Wide receiver Dean Patterson off to Georgia Tech, as well as wide receiver Eric Rivers is off to Georgia Tech. Safety JoJo Evans is off to Louisville, and tight end Rocky Beers is off to Colorado State. They do bring in a couple players. Running back AJ Allen coming over from Miami. Wide receiver Alex Perry coming over from Hawaii. Safety Demetrius Hill from Illinois, and edge Dante Anderson from Florida State. They do keep, which was I think was really key and big for Willie Simmons to keep quarterback Keon Jenkins. He had entered the portal, and then he withdrew from the portal, and he is returning. And so that's a big piece for the Panthers. But man, they lose so much talent on offense, especially at receiver, with both Rivers and Patterson moving on. And then defense, Travion Barnes, CJ Christian, they were two of the better players in all of the G5. Obviously, they're moving up to the Power Four. And so they're going to have to replace those two guys. I think it's going to be a little bit of a struggle. I think having Keon Jenkins return for the Panthers is going to help, but I do think this team is going to struggle in year one. I don't expect their record to be really any better than it was a year ago, given all the losses on offense and defense. You have any thoughts on the players, or you want to run down?
I want to go back to the coaches. So Javon DeWitt will be going into his fourth season. So he was retained by Willie Simmons. But OC is going to be Nick Coleman in his first season. He was the UAB QB coach in 2022 and 2023, and he was an offensive analyst for South Carolina in 2021 and 2022. So my fault there. I don't know what I was doing.
It's all good, man. We're all human. We all make mistakes. It's all good, man.
All right. So let's move over to Jacksonville State. Their coaching changes. Charles Kelly, first season as head coach comes via Auburn, where he was the co-DC and safeties coach. In 2023, he was the DC and safeties coach at Colorado. And in 2019 through 2022, he was the assistant DC and safeties coach at Alabama. Obviously, Coach Rodriguez goes to West Virginia. OC Clint Trickett will be in his first season. In 2024, he was the tight ends and passing game coordinator at Georgia Southern. In 2021 through 2023, he was at Marshall. 2021, he was a wide receiver coach and passing game coordinator. In 2022 and 2023, he was the OC and QB coach. And like we mentioned up earlier in the news, Brian Williams will be on their DC or be their defensive coordinator. He's been at Maryland since 2019. He was the co-DC and defensive line coach in 2021. And then he was the DC, so drops that co-title, still coaching the defensive line in 2022, 2023, and 2024. Williams typically runs a 4-3 defense. When he was a co-DC with Brian Stewart there at Maryland, he ran a 3-4 defense. Typically under Rich Rod, Jacksonville State's ran a 3-3-5, at least in 2024. They've also done some multiple defensive bases in 2022 and 2023, but in much more of a 3-3-5 last year. So I only want to bring that up just because when I think it was in North Texas and we were doing that summer school, or we were doing the Worker Bee series with them, Brett Vito had mentioned like, hey, we're trying to like fit a square into a round hole. I can't remember if they were moving to
a 3-man front,
and they just didn't have the bodies for it. So if Williams is typically running a 4-3 defense and Jacksonville State's been running a 3-3-5, and he just gets hired today, what do they have right now? He's had history with a multiple base defense, so we'll kind of see how that works. But that's just something to kind of note, like, hey, if maybe Jacksonville State's defense isn't as solid this year, like, I guess kind of hold your expectations in check. If they're just maybe don't have the right bodies in to run what they want to run. So that's just my watch out or friendly reminder.
Personnel-wise, they lose quarterback Tashawn Smoot off to Alabama State, safety Fred Perry to West Virginia, wide receiver Cam Vaughn to West Virginia, quarterback Zion Turner to Marshall, running back Anwar Lewis is to be determined. He is still in the transfer portal. Linebacker Jabril Alameen to Marshall, cornerback Jabari Mack to Louisville, cornerback Fred Davis II to Northwestern, safety Zechariah Poyser to Miami, linebacker Reginald Hughes to Colorado, quarterback Tyler Huff is out of eligibility, running back Trey Stewart is out of eligibility, offensive lineman Clay Webb is off to the NFL. He's one of the 10 offensive players that got a combine invite. Tight end Sean Brown is out of eligibility. Edge J-Rock Swain is out of eligibility. And linebacker Lalisha Hale is out of eligibility. They lose a ton of players, impact players, from my judgment on who they bring in. Running back Cam Cook from TCU, quarterback Gavin Wimsatt from Kentucky, and defensive lineman Curtis Perry from Virginia Tech. Man,
I forgot Gavin Wimsatt was at Kentucky. Last I remember, he was at
Rutgers. This team, they were the conference champs in 2024. And I don't see them having the same level of success here in 2025. They lose a ton, both offense and defense. I think the offense, I think they have, capable offensive skill players kind of come in. I think the defense is where you're going to see the big drop off and the big difference from a year ago. They lose so much on that defense, either from graduation or from the transfer portal. It's interesting. I think I don't. It'll be interesting to see the offense they run. Right, the Rich Rod offense was a very unique, different offense. You knew the quarterback and the running backs were going to run the ball. I don't know that we will see that same. I don't believe we'll see that same style of offense from Clint Trickett. But given the personnel, I don't know that that's what he wants to do. But given the personnel, I think that's kind of what they're going to have to do. That's where their strength will be, especially at running back. The Cam Cook signing, great. I think it's a great signing, but it's odd in the sense that running back was not in my opinion a position of need for Jacksonville State this offseason. They had Andrew Paul. Maybe they need it from a depth perspective, I guess. And Cam Cook's certainly, is a good running back. But yeah, I think like if Clint Trickett's going to rely on where the strengths are, it's going to be the running backs. And so we'll see. The problem is this defense may not be good enough to, produce game scripts that are going to, be very, super productive for the running backs. We'll see. They have to, do some rebuilding along the offensive line as well. Wimsatt, if you're not familiar with Gavin Wimsatt, he's a dual threat. I don't think he's as good of a passer as Tyler Huff. Maybe as good as he's a different kind of runner, I guess I would say, right? Maybe he's more electric, more slippery. He's not a run you over kind of guy. Whereas I think Tyler Huff was a bigger quarterback and could run you over. I don't know. I feel like this team is destined to be around the 500 mark, maybe slightly better in 2025. I certainly don't expect them to be competing for the championship in 2025. You have any thoughts?
I would agree on that. Just a whole new coaching staff, so I just don't anticipate there'll be a lot of I just feel like having all the success that they had last year will be hard to carry over going over to this year. So let's go over to the Kennesaw State Owls. So coaching changes. Jerry Mack, first season, he's getting his first stint as a head coach in 2024. He was the Jaguars running backs coach in 2021. In 2021 through 2023, he was at Tennessee as a running back coach there for the Vols. And then in 2018, he was the OC and quarterbacks coach. In 2029 and 2020, he picked up the assistant head coach title along with the OC and quarterbacks coach there at Tennessee. Let's see here. OC Mitch Militello will be in his first season, 2021 through 2024. He was a tutor of quarterbacks, not a quarterbacks coach, but all the verbiage and whatnot that I could come up with. Like, they kept wanting to say he was a quarterbacks coach, but there were no titles of QB coach or anything. So I just put him as a tutor of quarterbacks. But I think he was probably an offensive analyst at Tennessee in some fashion. DC Mark Mattioli will be in his season. He spent 2023 and 2024 as the head coach overseas for the Paris Musketeers. Only here on the G5 Hive will we be talking about the Paris Musketeers in the European League of Football in 2022 as the Panthers head coach to lead their team to the first Italian league title since 2013. There's your bar knowledge. If you want to impress some people, I'm sure they would be very, very impressed with your Panthers knowledge. 2015 through 2020, he worked on the defensive staff at Vanderbilt. I just wanted to keep going back further until we could find like a college team or something. I really don't know what European football is like in comparison. But yeah, so that's kind of an interesting makeup of this coaching staff.
Yeah, and we'll do some like real coaching deep dives at a later date, but I'm kind of interested in kind of what this offense is going to look like. I'm wondering, with both the HC, the head coach, and the offensive coordinator having some ties to Tennessee, if they're going to run or try and run an offense similar to the Tennessee offense, which is the same offense that South Florida runs, actually the same offense that Old Dominion runs as well. All kind of come from that Tennessee tree. So I'm interested to see if that's kind of what they lean towards there at Kennesaw State. Player-wise, they're losing tight end Carson Kent. He's off to Oklahoma. Running back Quay Ashley is off to Ball State. Defensive tackle Tamarius or Puda Walker is off to Memphis. And running back Michael Benefield is out of eligibility. They bring in quarterback Dexter Williams II over from Georgia Southern. Dexter Williams is a dual threat quarterback. He was at Indiana before coming over to Georgia Southern a year ago. He was second string at Georgia Southern. I think the Georgia Southern fans loved him. As with any college football program, oftentimes happens. They're always clamoring for the number 2 quarterback, and so they were wanting Dexter Williams II a lot over J.C. French, up until the point where Dexter Williams entered the portal. So it's gonna. Kennesaw State had a rough year last year. They did beat Liberty though, right? And Liberty wasn't great last year, but that was a shock, right? Because Kennesaw State was not good. They found a way to beat the Liberty Flames a year ago. I don't know that from a win total perspective that this year is going to be much different or much better, right? When Brian Bohannon was fired, they had a lot of guys pretty much immediately enter the portal. And so I don't know if they had a ton of talent to begin with. So they bring in Dexter Williams II. I don't know that other than him that they're bringing in a lot of talent. So I don't know that I expect much more than a couple wins. I think they had 2 wins last year. Without looking at their schedule, I don't know that I would expect any more than that here in their second year in FBS. But really, it's a kind of a start over, right? With a whole new coaching staff, it's basically starting fresh once again.
Yeah, I would expect the over-under for their win total to be 1.5 or so. I want to go back to head coach Jerry Mack because I don't believe I mentioned the team that he was with after his time there at Tennessee's. I mentioned 2021 through 2023, he was with the Tennessee Vols as the running backs coach. Well, he was with Rice in 2018 through 2020. In 2018, he was OC and QB coach. 2019 and 2020, he picked up that assistant head coach title along with being the OC and quarterbacks coach. So he was over at Rice for a bit. I don't think I mentioned Rice, so I want to make sure to capture that. But that will take us into our next team, the Liberty Flames. Coaching changes, no changes. Jamie Chadwell going into his 3rd season brings back OC Willie Korn and Newland Isaac for their 3rd season. Skylar McGee in his 2nd season and Kyle Krantz in his 2nd season. Krantz is also coaching special teams, outside linebacker. So he's the co-defensive coordinator. I would assume maybe Skylar's more of the brains behind the operation type thing, knowing that
Yeah.
your other coaches going at special teams and outside linebacker and such.
Personnel-wise, they lose offensive tackle Jordan Hall to Tulane, running back James Jointer Jr. to Eastern Michigan, quarterback Caden Salter off to Colorado, offensive line Jordan White to Vanderbilt, wide receiver Kylan Austin to be determined, running back Quentin Cooley out of eligibility, running back Billy Lucas out of eligibility, tight end Bentley Hanshaw out of eligibility, wide receiver Trayon Sibley out of eligibility, and safety Quentin Reese out of eligibility. Who do they bring in? Offensive lineman Christian Williams from Florida, wide receiver Jamari Persons from Colorado State, wide receiver Casey Kane from UNLV, quarterback Ethan Vasco from Coastal, linebacker Deuce Spurlock II from Florida, and running back Evan Dickens from Georgia Tech. It sounds weird, but I think this team might be better than they were in 2024. I don't know that they're going to be significantly better. Ethan Vasco obviously has some familiarity with Jamie Chadwell.
He was a freshman, right?
He played. He was there Chadwell's last season at Coastal. Vasco kind of fits the mold, I think, of a Chadwell quarterback. His passing can oftentimes leave something to be desired, but he can be effective with his legs. And I really like the addition of Evan Dickens from Georgia Tech. He was someone that I liked coming into Georgia Tech, and so I'm kind of excited to kind of see what he's going to do in that Flames backfield. Right, they lose Quentin Cooley and Billy Lucas. Obviously, Von Blue does return, but I'm interested to see this spring how Evan Dickens does, and if he can kind of be a 1A and 1B with Von Blue. We've seen that Liberty offense kind of use two running backs, or that Chadwell offense, I should say, use two running backs effectively. And I think Evan Dickens has an opportunity to potentially be one of those two running backs. I feel like 8-9 wins, somewhere around there for Liberty. I haven't seen their out conference schedule. I do know they play Old Dominion this year, so hopefully I'm gonna count that as a loss for Liberty. I'm pretty sure the game is at Old Dominion.
That is correct.
But Ethan Vasco's had Old Dominion's number when he was at Coastal. He's beat Old Dominion twice. Once over those times in Norfolk. So hopefully we can win.
Schedule-wise, I like them to be better. This last year, they were 8-4. I only really feel like there are 2 solid losses on their schedule-ish, like one for sure. So they've got Maine at Jacksonville State. So, like a new team trying to still figure it out. Like I see them winning that game. Then they go at Bowling Green. Bowling Green should be a solid team. Obviously losing some pieces. We'll preview the MAC next week. Then at home against James Madison. On the road at Old Dominion. Off week, UTEP, New Mexico State. Off week, Delaware, Missouri State, FIU, Louisiana Tech, Kennesaw.
So they avoid Western Kentucky. Trying to think who else that they avoid. They avoid Sam Houston. So
Middle Tennessee.
It certainly, I agree with you. I mean, to me, the 2 hardest games are JMU and Old Dominion.
And then I don't know, maybe Bowling Green. Bowling Green will be a fundamental team. So
I mean, it does. The schedule definitely looks favorable for the Flames in 2025. I mean, favorable enough where you can make an argument they might be in the conference championship game again. And they were in the mix last year, but they kind of felt like the fourth best team in Conference USA. With this schedule, especially this conference schedule, I could see them going undefeated in conference. And
could be. I think their hardest 4-game stretch is there at the beginning. You get at Jacksonville State. What team will Jacksonville State be? At Bowling Green, at Old Dominion. You got 3 away games, and then at home against James Madison. So I think I feel like maybe
and only one of those games is a conference game. So
I feel like James Madison maybe gets the win. And then going on the road for 3 of those games. Like I feel like maybe you lose one of those 3 games. So maybe 2 losses all season.
Yeah.
Very, very reasonable there for the Liberty Flames. Let's get into the next team, Louisiana Tech Bulldogs. They went 5-8 last season. Coaching changes. We'll just kind of go over the coaches. So we've got Sonny Cumbie for the head coach, will be in his 4th season. Offensive coordinator Tony Franklin, he'll be also the quarterback's coach. This is going to be his 2nd stint with the team. He was the OC in 2010 through 2012. He most recently was the OC and quarterback's coach of the Army Sprint football team in 2022. I had to look this up. I was like, I don't know what the Army Sprint is. But Army Sprint is in the CSFL, or the Collegiate Sprint Football League. Players must weigh 178 pounds or less. Interesting. Defensive coordinator Luke Olson, he was the DC at Jacksonville State in 2024, so this will be his 1st season with the team. Prior to that, he was at TCU. While at TCU, he was the senior defensive analyst in 2023. In 2022, he was a DC for Tulsa. So he's kind of been out of place a year, go somewhere else, out of place a year, go somewhere else. But Luke Olson, the new DC there.
I think the interesting thing is, Sonny Cumbie bringing on an OC, right? And I also believe Cumbie is giving up play calling duties as well. So that'll be, I think, a first for the Bulldogs. I like the hire of Luke Olson. He did an outstanding job last year at Jacksonville State, and the defense at Louisiana Tech was probably one of the better defenses a year ago in Conference USA. So I think they'll kind of keep that going, even though like I said, it's his 1st season. I think pretty sure it's Franklin's 1st season as well. Be interesting to see like what the offense looks like, right? With kind of Cumbie kind of handing off the reins, so to speak, to an OC. Player wise, they lose wide receiver True Edwards off to Kentucky, safety Pig Cage off to Incarnate Word, running back Donario Davenport off to Jackson State, defensive tackle David Blay off to Miami, kicker Buck Buchanan to Colorado, and linebacker Zach Zemos out of eligibility. They do bring in safety Cam Franklin over from Oklahoma State. Blay's probably the biggest loss for this team. He was a difference maker there at defensive tackle in the middle, and so that's going to be probably their biggest challenge to have to replace. Offense, they return Evan Bullock, quarterback, who at times last year looked outstanding, right? And so I would think they're going to keep the offensive system very similar, right? And see how Bullock can kind of grow with another year of experience under his belt. He had 14 touchdowns, 3 interceptions a year ago, pass for 2,107 yards. Again, there was games where he played lights out, looked like a difference maker. So he's returning. I didn't mention, but Jack Turner, the backup, he's transferred out. I believe he ended up at FCS school. Running back Omari Wiggins returns. He was their leading rusher a year ago. Marquise Crosby returns. Probably the biggest thing is his receiver, right? They lose, I believe, their top two in True Edwards and Jimmy Holiday. Marlon Jackson returns. He's someone that maybe could step up and take some of those vacated targets. But that's probably on offense. Is probably the one area there you need some guys to step up as that receiver. And I think defensive, like I said, replacing defensive tackle David Blay, who was all Conference USA level performer in 2024.
And I feel like that will be. They were 5-8 last season. I feel like that sounds about right. Maybe a couple more wins. I don't have their schedule pulled up.
Yeah, they they play Southeast Louisiana. That's a win. You consider Kennesaw State a win, Delaware a win. You give Missouri State a win. That's 4. So LSU would be a loss. New Mexico State, I think you could expect them to win that game. UTEP, Western Kentucky, Sam Houston, Washington State, Liberty, and Southern Miss is the rest of their schedule. I mean, I think they could get the bowl eligibility. I think I got like 6-6 sounds about right to me.
Right. Well, let's make our way over to Middle Tennessee. Blue Raiders, coaching changes. There are none this season. Head coach Derek Mason going into his second season, as well as offensive coordinator Bodie Reeder and defensive coordinator Brian Stewart.
Personnel-wise, they lose a backup quarterback, Luther Richardson, over to Central Arkansas. Safety, Xavier Williams, Cincinnati. Punter, Grant Chadwick to LSU. Don't mention punters very often, but he was one of the top freshman punters in the nation last year, and he's off to, like I said, LSU. Wide receiver Omari Kelly to Michigan State. Running back Frank Peasant is in the transfer portal, and tight end Holden Willis is out of eligibility. The biggest impact as far as what they bring in was offensive lineman E.J. Harris coming over from Auburn. They do return their quarterback, Nicholas Vadiato. Didn't quite probably have the year he envisioned. He did throw for over 3,000 yards, only 10 touchdowns and 10 interceptions. The running game last year wasn't great. Their leading rusher, Jaden Credle, returned, but he only had 471 yards. But they do lose both of their top receivers. Both Holden Willis and Omari Kelly went over 800 yards a year ago. Both had over 50 receptions. And so that they're going to have to replace those two guys. Miles Butler, Cameron Lacey, maybe those two guys step up. I don't know that, necessarily that someone, I think Holden Willis was a tight end, but I think it was more so his talent as a player than the quote tight end position for Middle Tennessee. That would have kind of where I would expect that level of production for this year's tight end. It was a very, lackluster year in Derek Mason's first year, right? It wasn't good. I would say it failed to meet my expectations. I think you and I were last offseason. I think we were not so crazy about Derek Mason, but we felt like the offensive coordinator there and Bodie Reeder would do better, right? Mason was not he's more of a defensive guy, and known as a defensive guy. So there was definitely some concerns. And I think we expected a little bit of a downtick in offensive production from Nicholas Vadiato. But I think we were more optimistic about Bodie Reeder being the OC and what might happen than versus what actually occurred. it'll be interesting to see if these guys can get things turned around here in year 2, because they might not make it to year 3 if year 2 is as bad as year 1.
Yeah, I'm expecting at least a better showing this year. But yeah, like you said, having Omari Kelly that goes to Michigan State on your team and you kind of still struggled to find your footing here in year 1. I'm a Bodie Reader believer. Let's hopefully they can get things turned around this year.
I mean, they do have a I don't know, I'd say not an easy out of conference schedule. Austin P, okay. They play Wisconsin, they play Nevada, and they play Marshall. Those are their 4 out of conference games, and I don't know. Austin P looks like the only one that they should win.
Yeah. We'll see about Nevada because they lose some guys. Marshall pretty much loses its team.
Yeah, Marshall had 75. I think it was 75 players either coming or going. They didn't lose 75, but if you add up what they lost versus what come in, it was like 75. So turnover of 75.
All right. Emmanuel, welcome to the chat. Let's move over to our next team, and that is Missouri State Bears, new to the conference this year, 8-4. No coaching changes, but figure we get to know these coaches a little bit more. Head coach Ryan Beard is in his 3rd season. He was the DC under Bobby Petrino in 2020 through 2023. He is 12-11 all time with the Bears. Offensive coordinator Nick Petrino in his 6th season, son of Bobby Petrino. 2023, Petrino's stellar offense catapulted Missouri State to the top of the FCS in numerous offensive categories, including number 5 in the nation in passing, 300.3 yards per game, number 7 in passing efficiency, 26th in total offense at 400.8 yards per game, and 31st in scoring, 29.8. Defensive coordinator L.D. Scott will be in his 3rd season, but he's been with the school for his 6th season. So Nick Petrino, L.D. Scott, been there for a while, and Ryan Beard, again, in his 3rd season.
All right. Player personnel-wise, they lose linebacker Taj Chambers off to Ole Miss. Defensive back Avery Powell off to Temple. Linebacker Dallas Winter Johnson to Tulane. Running back Jaden Becks to North Texas. Running back Jacardia Wright is out of eligibility. Wide receiver Hunter Woods is out of eligibility. Wide receiver Jamari Robinson is in the transfer portal. Wide receiver Devontae Key out of eligibility. And defensive lineman edge Darian Smith is out of eligibility. They bring in wide receiver Isaiah McMorris from Nebraska, quarterback Drew Viato from Eastern Michigan, running back Shamari Lawrence, who we talked about earlier, from Florida International, and defensive end or edge DJ Wesolak from Oregon State. Unlike I think our expectations for Delaware, I think Missouri State, at least from an offensive perspective, I think is going to be able to score some points and hang with some of these Conference USA teams. Jacob Clark returns. He's a veteran for them. Maybe a little bit shocked that he didn't enter the transfer portal. But last year, he was one of the best players in the FCS. He was a semifinalist for the Walter Payton Award. The Walter Payton Award in the FCS is the equivalent of the Heisman on the FBS side. He's also a finalist for the Missouri Valley Offensive Player of the Year. So, Clark, that's a big return for him. They do, like I said, they do have to replace their running backs. With one of them leaving and one out of eligibility. But they bring in Shamari Lawrence from FIU. They also return Iverson Young. He was formerly over Montana before transferring to Missouri State last year, I believe. I believe probably the biggest challenge for them will be wide receiver. I think they lose their top 3 or 4 receivers. They got to replace all those guys. But they do return probably what's going to be one of the top tight ends in the conference. Might be the preseason all-conference tight end for Conference USA, and that's Lance Mason returning for them. Last year, Lance Mason was their second leading receiver, 34 receptions, 590 yards, and 6 touchdowns. So that's big to return Lance's production. I think the problems for Missouri State are going to be on the defensive side. Their defense wasn't great last year. They've lost more pieces, that have transferred. And so I think that's going to be the Achilles heel of Missouri State, of why maybe they don't have as much success as they would like. It's going to be that defense. If they're able to get, some production out of that defense, this team, I can see them going 500. I think they have an above average, offense. But I think the defense is below average, and that's what's really going to hold them down. But I do expect, their transition to be better than, say, what I expect from Delaware, and even what I expect from Kennesaw State in their second year in Conference USA. So I do think the offense will keep Missouri State at least somewhat competitive.
No other things, I guess, to add to that. So let's move over to New Mexico State Aggies. They were 3-9 last season. Coaching changes. Head coach Tony Sanchez will be in his second season. Again, if you're not familiar with Tony Sanchez, he was previously the Aggies wide receiver coach for the last 2 years. Prior to being the head coach, has head coaching experience from the UNLV staff, 2015 to 2019. OC David Yost will be in his first season. He was the OC and quarterbacks coach for FIU 2022 through 2024. Going back to 2017, he held the same title at Texas Tech and Utah State. So been an OC for quite some time. DC Joe Morris will be in his second season, same as Tony Sanchez. Previously was the DC and DN's coach for Sam Houston the 3 years prior. If you don't recall Joe Morris's stops along the way.
Player-wise, they lose quarterback Brandon Nunez, who's in the transfer portal still. Running back Mike Washington is off to Arkansas. Offensive tackle Louis Canepa to Oklahoma State. Wide receiver David Cordell out of eligibility, and all-conference center Kanan Yarrow is also out of eligibility. They bring in running back Dominic Richardson from Baylor, and quarterback Logan Fife comes over from Montana. The strength of this team, I think, where it was last year, is going to be the same. That's the running backs. Both Seth McGowan and Mike Washington had really good years. A year ago, Seth McGowan was their leading rusher, 823 yards. Mike Washington had 725 a year ago. They bring in Dominic Richardson coming over from Baylor. I expect, him and Seth McGowan are going to be a kind of a 1A, 1B punch. Those are definitely the highlights, I think, of the team. Those are the 2 best players on the team. I think Logan Fife probably is a more capable quarterback than what they had a year ago. I don't know that I would consider him a difference maker at quarterback, but definitely improved over what we saw a year ago. They return freshman TJ Pride at receiver. He was one of the top freshmen in the G5 a year ago. He was their leading receiver with 34 catches for 374 yards. I think what this coaching staff wants to do, and it aligns with their strengths on offense anyway, is they want to run the ball. And I think that's what their plan is going in. The question will be is, will the defense be improved enough to allow the game script to just keep pounding the rock? And that's certainly where they have the talent on offense, like I said, at running back. I don't know that this team is drastically improved from a year ago. Would it shock me if they got to 6 wins? Probably not. I don't think it would shock me. But I would say it's probably their ceiling is 6 wins.
All right. Not much to add there. So let's move on to our next team. Sam Houston Bearkats, 10-3 last season. Head coach Phil Longo will be in his first season. He was with the Bearkats in 2014 through 2016, and he's back again. He was the OC at Wisconsin in 2023. 2019 through 2022, he was with North Carolina as their OC. DC Freddie Autry Lindsay will be in his first season. He spent 5 seasons as the Nichols coach at NC State. I haven't dug too much into it, but I'm just curious if Longo liked what he saw when he was scheming up plays while his time at North Carolina. He's like, hey, I don't like going up against this guy's secondary. I want him on my team. I'll be curious if there's something to that. Brett in the chat says that is another interesting hire.
Yeah, it is. And it's gonna be. I think it's gonna be real interesting to kind of see what this offense looks like. I don't expect this offense in year one. Maybe I'm being presumptuous here, but I'm assuming Hunter Watson is going to be your starting quarterback. I don't think you're going to see Phil Longo throw the ball nearly as much as he did at Wisconsin and North Carolina. Now, maybe we'll get to there's a quarterback that's transferring following Phil Longo over from Wisconsin, but I expect it to be Hunter Watson as the starter. And so be interesting to kind of see what this offense looks like year one. Let's get to the players. Who are they losing? Running back Jay Ducker off to Temple. Defensive lineman Denver Warren off to UAB. Edge Chris Murray to Auburn. Edge Kendrick DuJour, East Carolina. Quarterback Jace Bauer to UT Martin. Safety Isaiah Cash to Virginia Tech. Wide receiver Simeon Evans to North Texas. Linebacker Samaj Burrell to North Texas. Cornerback Devon Armstead to North Texas. Safety Caleb Weaver to Duke. Edge Brycean Hayes to North Texas. Linebacker Trey Fields to North Texas. Running back DJ McKinney to New Mexico. Wide receiver Noah Smith is out of eligibility. Wide receiver Ife Ade out of eligibility. And linebacker Kavion Gaither is out of eligibility. They bring in running back Elijah Green from Indiana, who had familiarity with Phil Longo at North Carolina because he was at North Carolina before Indiana. Defensive lineman A.J. Sargent from Tarleton State. Linebacker Antavius Fish from Akron. Safety Jalen Stanford from Houston. Cornerback Jace Arnold from Wisconsin. Quarterback Mabry Matower from Wisconsin. And safety Cecil Powell from Troy. This team was in the thick of things for the Conference USA title a year ago. They won their first bowl game this year, 10-win season. Their defense last year was lights out. But if you paid attention to all those names I read who was leaving, man, the defense has got to be like completely rebuilt from a year ago. A lot of those players, that they weren't moving up to P4 teams, they followed their defensive coordinator over to North Texas. And so, yeah, offensively, I think they'll be fine. Defensively, it's not going to be good. It's not going to be as good as last year. I'm confident in saying that. Last year, this defense was special. I don't think they will be special in 2025. Just too many bodies they have to replace. A new DC, new coaching staff. But I do think Sam Houston gets back to a bowl game. I don't know that they will have the defense that will be as dominant as was in 2024 to kind of, prepare for them to be able to compete for a Conference USA title in 2025.
Listen to this schedule. Game 1 at WKU, at home against UNLV. Then they go to Hawaii, off week, at Texas, off week, New Mexico State, Jacksonville State, UTEP, off week, at Louisiana Tech, at Oregon State, at home against the Delaware, at Middle Tennessee, and then at home, FIU. That's a rough schedule. Realistically, probably a 50-50 game against Western Kentucky. Let's just say 50-50. UNLV will probably be pretty good. We're high on Hawaii this year. Then Texas. So there's a realistic chance. I don't think it's going to happen.
They're probably 0-4 at that point.
0-4 to start off, and you've already had 2 bye weeks. They've got 3 this season, and then like you said, you get New Mexico State, Jacksonville State, UTEP. But you've played Jacksonville State so many weeks into the season, maybe they've kind of figured out who they are. So this will be an interesting year for Sam Houston.
Yeah, they have Oregon State later on. Yeah, I mean it's a kind of a tough schedule.
It is.
Yeah. I think like if I was a Sam Houston fan, I think I would be happy with a bowl game, and I think they can get to a bowl game. But I think 6-7 wins is probably what they're staring at in 2025.
Well, let's make our way over to our next team here, and that is UTEP Miners. Coaching changes. Head coach Scotty Walden back for his second season. Head coach joins the Miner after 4 seasons as a head coach at Austin Peay State. OC Jake Brown is out. They had co-OCs, so Jake Brown's out, but Ryan Stansek keeps the co-OC tag. He will be in his second season. Ryan was the co-OC and offensive line coach under Scotty Walden at Austin Peay in 2022. In 2023, he was the O-line coach at Tulsa before last year reuniting with Coach Walden. Then Mark Kala will be his first season. He will get the tag of the co-OC. He comes from TCU, where he served as the quarterbacks coach in 2023 and 2024. Prior to his stop at TCU, he was at Arkansas in 2020 through 2022, where he was an offensive analyst and assistant quarterback coach. DC, they'll have co-DCs. Kevin Sigler will be back for his second season. Again, he spent his time at Jacksonville State prior to that, 2018 to 2023. In 2022 and 2023, he was associate head coach and DC and safeties coach under Rich Rod there at Jacksonville State. J.J. Clark was the other co-DC with Kelvin last year. He's out after one season, and he joins the Dallas Cowboys as a defensive assistant. So right now, Kelvin Sigler is the DC coordinator altogether. No co-DC so far. Now, if they were to add another person later, I wouldn't be surprised. But yeah, that went from a co-DC duo last year to just Kelvin Sigler this year.
Personnel-wise, they lose edge Maurice Westmoreland off to Tulane. Running back Javon Jackson to UAB. Freshman defensive end edge and our freshman defensive player of the year in 2024. Kyron Duhan is off to Oklahoma State. Wide receiver Trey Goodman is out of eligibility. Running back Isel Jolly is off to Kilgore Junior College. Linebacker Dorian Hopkins out of eligibility. Spur Corey Chapman is out of eligibility. They bring in wide receiver Armani Roan from Arkansas Pine Bluff. Prior to that, Armani was at Ohio. They bring running back Hashawn Wilson from Charlotte, and the big name quarterback, former 5-star, I believe maybe number one of the top recruits in college football. Was it 3 years ago now, I guess? Malachi Nelson comes in over from Boise State. Before that, he was at USC. That's interesting, right? Is Malachi going to be able to resurrect his career and show folks why he was one of the top recruits and a 5-star quarterback recruit coming out of high school? That's I think he'll certainly get the opportunity at UTEP. Quarterback was a revolving door for them a year ago between Cade McConnell, Skylar Locklear. Then they had some injuries, and all name team member JP Pickles had to come in, and I think he played the last 2 games, I think, or last game at least of the year. They had some bright moments, and then they had some not so good moments. They were very, very inconsistent a year ago. They lose their top running back in Javon Jackson. That was an interesting situation. Like he was their starter, and then like he got in the doghouse, and Izell Jolly kind of took over, and then towards the end of the season, Javon Jackson got back in the good graces and was their starter once again, and now he's gone. But they bring in the transfer and Hashawn Wilson. The thing I still remember about Hashawn Wilson, I want to say, I think it was 2023. He had a game where he rushed for over 200 yards for Charlotte. He didn't do too much last year, and he didn't do too much other than that one game towards the end of the 23 season where I want to say he had like 220 yards and 3 or 4 touchdowns, something like that. I think Scotty Walton's a good coach. I think he will get things turned around. Whether it's going to happen here in year 2, I don't know.
We got their schedule: Utah State, at Utah State, UT Martin, Texas, UL Monroe, Louisiana Tech, off Liberty, Sam Houston, off Kennesaw State, Jacksonville State, Missouri State, New Mexico State, Delaware. So not like an awful end to the season there. 5 winnable games. What does Sam Houston look like? They'll probably be figuring themselves out there at that point. That'll be a tough schedule. Like this last season they were 3-9. I see more than 3 wins.
I think they can get the bowl eligibility, and I think that would be a success. I don't know that it'd be easy to get to 6 wins, but I think it's doable. Unless Malachi Nelson just is his shoulder just ain't what it should be. I think which is kind of what's held him back is his shoulder injury. So I mean, I think if Malachi Nelson can just be a capable quarterback, somewhat, he didn't have to be like the best thing ever, but I think if he can provide some more consistency, and be, I don't know, 70% of what he was coming, or what the expectations were coming out of high school, that I can see them getting to 6 wins.
And they open up that schedule on the road, at home, on the road at Texas. You'd like to play Texas on the road, obviously. You don't want that to be a home game. And then at home and at home. So they've got a pretty good start to the season. Let's move over to our next team, and that is Western Kentucky Hilltoppers. They were 8-6 last season. Head coach Tyson Helton will be back for his 7th season. offensive coordinator Rick Bowie will be in his first season, and Drew Hollingshead, he's out. He was now going to be the OC at Coastal. Will Friend, he is going to be the offensive line coach at UNC. So that's who Rick Bowie is replacing there. He was the offensive coordinator and quarterbacks coach at Abilene Christian. Bowie's offense ranked fourth in total offense with 469.6 yards per game and 16th nationally in scoring with 33.8 points per game. Abilene Christian ranked 7th nationally in passing offense in 2022 and 2023. He was the OC and quarterback at Valdosta State Division II. In 2023, Bowie's offense averaged 36.9 points per game and was in the top 10 nationally in passing yards per game and total touchdowns. So we can expect, maybe not year one, but they're going to want to pass the ball. They're going to want to score points. And like I said, a couple of years, they're over 400 yards per game. Defensive coordinator Devon Brown will be in his first season. He's getting a promotion. Tyson Summers was their defensive coordinator last year. He's off to Colorado State. Devon Brown spent 2023 and 2024 as the DB's coach. He was continued to coach the DBs on top of his newly acquired DC title. Before Western Kentucky, he was at Ole Miss as a grad assistant in 2021 and a defensive analyst in 2022. Also, defensive coordinator David Merritt will be in his first season. Again, another promotion. In 2023 and 2024, he was the inside linebacker coach. He will continue to coach the inside linebackers along with his title of defensive coordinator. Before Western Kentucky, Merritt was at Georgia as a defensive quality control coordinator for 2 seasons.
So, I think we've seen this offensive song and dance from Western Kentucky before. It happened, was it 2019 or I think it was 2019 with Arbuckle and Bailey Zappi coming over from back then. It was Houston Baptist. Now it's Houston Christian.
I think that might have been 2021.
Was it? Okay, it was somewhere around there. But
yeah.
Point being, they saw a productive passing offense in the FCS, and they brought over the offensive coordinator and the quarterback, and they've done the same thing again. They bring over Bowie as offensive coordinator, and they bring over their quarterback of that offense, Maverick McIver, coming over in the transfer portal. But before I get to who they're bringing in, talk about who's leaving. Wide receiver Coy Moore off to UNLV. Tight end River Helms off to Georgia Southern. Running back LT Sanders to North Alabama. Offensive lineman Rodney Newsom Jr. to South Carolina. Wide receiver Easton Messer to Florida Atlantic. Quarterback Caden Veltkamp off to Florida Atlantic. Edge Deontay McCray to Florida State. Quarterback TJ Finley to Tulane. Defensive lineman Hosea Wheeler to Indiana. Safety DeMarco Williams is in the transfer portal. Wide receiver Dalvin Smith is out of eligibility. Wide receiver Keyshawn Johnson is out of eligibility. Wide receiver Michael Matheson is out of eligibility. And cornerback Anthony Johnson Jr. is out of eligibility. Who they're bringing in, as I mentioned, quarterback Maverick McIver coming over from Abilene Christian, following his OC there. They bring in wide receiver Kelby Williams from Old Dominion, edge Vincent Sneed Jr. from Indiana, wide receiver Cody Epps from BYU, and cornerback Braxton Myers from Southern Miss. I personally expect Western Kentucky to kind of be probably the best team, at least today, in Conference USA. I mean, offensively, that's kind of they've thrown the ball a lot. It's what they've done year in and year out. I don't see this year being any different. The biggest question mark is probably wide receiver. they lose losing Easton Messer, Dalvin Smith, and Keyshawn Johnson, their top 3 options from a year ago. But they returned Katie Hutchison, who's shown some promise. I think Cody Epps from BYU, I think that was a good addition, and Kelby Williams from Old Dominion. Kelby didn't get on the field a lot for Old Dominion last year, but when he did get on the field, he proved he was a playmaker, and so I think if he can consistently stay on the field, he'll be a playmaker for the Hilltoppers as well. Just given Western Kentucky's history, and like I said, this even though it's a new OC, and but they're bringing the quarterback over, which, like I said, we've seen that already happen once with them. I just feel like they're going to have a leg up on the competition. Defense has always been kind of the Achilles heel, if you will, of Western Kentucky. I don't know that this year is going to be any different. And sometimes they can become one-dimensional, right? Where they don't run the ball, they want to pass the ball all over the place. I think it feels to me like Conference USA comes down to probably Liberty and Western Kentucky.
Those will be facing off in my championship. Let me run through the schedule real quick. Sam Houston, North Alabama, at Toledo, off week, Nevada, at Missouri State, at Delaware, off week, FIU, at Louisiana Tech, New Mexico State, off week, Middle Tennessee, at LSU, at Jacksonville State. I mean, I like that season. I like Western Kentucky versus Liberty, and I think it's going to be whichever team has found their identity first.
Yeah, I mean, I only see what I would say one for sure loss, right? And that's against LSU.
At Toledo will be tough because Toledo.
It'll be tough. Yeah, absolutely.
As well.
That'll be a tough
game
one
to watch because you'll have hopefully a high-flying offense there in by week 3. Toledo plays some good defense, so we'll see how that game goes. But yeah, I like how the season or the schedule shakes out for Western Kentucky, similar to Liberty, where I think those two teams end up squaring off in the championship.
Yeah, they don't play in the regular season, but yeah, as of today, I agree with you. I think Western Kentucky and Liberty look like the two best teams in Conference USA, and they were third or second. I guess Western Kentucky made the championship this past year, losing to Jacksonville State, and Liberty was
long field goal.
Yeah, they beat them the week before on a 50-yard field goal.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
They beat them. They beat them the week before to make it to the conference championship game. But then at that point, it didn't. Jacksonville State was in the championship game, so it didn't matter. It didn't have the same, consequences for Jacksonville State as it did for Western Kentucky. They had to win to get in, and when it mattered, Jacksonville State put it on them pretty bad. But I think Western Kentucky and Liberty, at least early on, look like the two best teams in Conference USA.
All right. Well, come back and join us next week as we continue to bring you up to date on all the latest news and happenings in the world of G5 college football. We'll be back live with you next Monday, February 24th, right around that 10:30 p.m. Eastern Time, as we discuss the transfer portal and coaching changes in the Mid-American Conference, also known as the MAC. If you're watching us on YouTube, please hit that like and subscribe button. On X, give us a follow. And if you're listening to us in Apple Podcasts or Spotify, please subscribe and leave those 5-star ratings and reviews. Thank you all for your support. Until the next time, we are the G55.
Go!